of, for that. Yeah.
Okay, we are live. Welcome back, everyone, to another town hall. Let me go ahead and share my screen here and get our notes up, and we're going to dive right into it. And oh, there's Adam. Welcome. Good morning. And Sarah's here. Hi. Okay, so let's just go through our usual items. Then we're going to talk some about our release of liability agreement, which is something that Connie's here to talk about and has some questions. So we'll get to that shortly. Action items. Sarah, update and publish the press release response for Ukraine. Where are we at on that? Sarah, are you here?
I think both websites have been updated with physical address. So I scheduled the press release to go out today, and unless there are any objections or anyone wants me to add or change anything, I can send it out today. But wanted to wait until the town hall just to be sure that.
Sure.
Yeah.
There is lore about Tuesday being the best day to release a press release. On the other
Okay.
hand, this has been delayed so many times for so many reasons that I wouldn't mind just declaring victory. What do you think?
I can hold it until Tuesday if you would like, but that's up to you.
I'm just Googling the phrase best day to release a press release. It says Thursday is the best day to send out the press release, according to press.farm and Prowley.com. Don't ask me why.
Worst case scenario. Do you wait another 6 days?
Right. And another site says, don't send them out on Wednesdays, Fridays, or weekends if at all possible. So I think we should definitely not do it today. And and everyone seems to say that Thursday between 10 to 2 is generally considered the best time. So why don't you just schedule it for Thursday, 10:30 a.m. and
Okay.
don't look back.
Okay, I can do that.
Sorry, my dog is going crazy on the hardwood floors upstairs, so you're probably gonna hear some scraping. Okay, Jeremy, update ETF site with street address. That was done, so it's on the bottom of the site, kind of in the footer. I didn't make it very visible, but the crawlers can find it. Jeremy, reach out to Microsoft nonprofit support team. All right, I did spend some time researching this. I did find my way to the nonprofit grant renewal, which had expired in October. As far as I'm aware, I never got any notifications or anything like that, but there was a one-click renewal. So I clicked it and it's renewed. Problem is it's a grant for $3,500 and we're currently at something like $5,400 a year at our consumption rate. So we're going to run through that before the year is out, unless we get some help. And I am working on that. I found that they had an offer for an Azure onboarding concierge. So I scheduled that. They say it could take up to a week for them to reach out to me. So I'm waiting for that. And I'm hoping they'll be able to help me kind of streamline things. But we shouldn't be too far off at this point from having a discussion about maybe kind of bringing e-NABLE Web Central to end of life. And that would mean being able to shut down the servers that are handling that. That's most of our cost right now. I did have a meeting with Brent about the new matching platform, which he's interested in being involved with. He's not going to be available to really work on it for at least several months. So it kind of depends on whether we could find somebody else to help us get that going sooner. But that's kind of where we're at on that. So anyway, as far as this action item goes, I think this is done. I still need to work on the setup on Azure to reduce our monthly spend, but at least the grant is reactivated. This next one is, yeah, go ahead, John.
I'm sorry, Jeremy. I'm just wondering, so there were some months, which is when the billing started, when the grant had expired, and suddenly you started getting bills. But if they're perfectly willing to do it, I wonder if they'd be willing to retro apply the grant. Oh, but finding a human is hard. I'm sure you'll take it up with the concierge.
I will, and he's going to tell me that I'd have to talk to somebody in some other department, and then I'll never be able to get through to them.
All right, your time is valuable too, Jeremy.
This is what you're talking about. So this is from the last time that we got reimbursed from the e-NABLE fund. This is when the billing continued. So notice that our grant expired in October, but we were getting billed from July. So that's because we had already consumed the grant from last year. And so we started
see.
getting billed again in July. And so, yeah, as of now, I'm another 3,100 out of pocket. But right now my focus is just on getting the setup, configured so
Okay.
that we're not getting billed so much, and then we'll figure out
Right.
what to do about that. Okay, so I'll report back on that soon. Jeremy and Adam to meet to work on Trello and associated processes. We got a meeting on the schedule for next Tuesday. Thank you, Adam. So we've got a 1-hour work session. We're going to work through how to kind of optimize this. And why am I offline? Anyway, kind of we've got it. I think we've got the right tool. Now it's a matter of figuring out kind of what do we wrap around this and how do we make it work within the e-NABLE environment? How do we share it with volunteers? How do we get people tied into this? So there's just a lot of discussion about surrounding process and how to manage and how to use this. And that's going to happen on Tuesday. So we'll report back on that after our meeting next time. John, have you had a chance to write up anything on Lumio about the fiscal sponsorship?
I have not. Evan is on vacation right now. He'll be back next week.
Sounds good. And then me to coordinate a meeting with Adam and Illinois Assistive Technology Program. Sent out an email this morning, introduced those teams and gave them a link to schedule something. So that's in progress. No special presentations coming up. So let's take a peek at our metrics. They look pretty similar. Now, I don't think Rick has started updating the chapter number yet. We should talk to him about that, because at this point we should have some kind of a better sense. I know we're not to a final number yet, but I'm guessing he's probably taken, some off the list by now, maybe added some. I'd be curious to know where we stand as of now. I'm not missing him, right? He's not here today, right? No, it doesn't look like it. Okay. All right, so let's move on. Okay, from the hub, we've got one post from Rishab requesting some help printing. Cupertino Base High School chapter leader in the process of printing 10 Phoenix Unlimited arms, adult size 5 right, 5 left. Plan to have an event to assemble these arms in April or early June, then donate the arms to an organization in Ghana. Interesting. It sounds like they got a connection out there. That's pretty cool. Would anyone be willing to help with printing some arms for us and sending them to us unassembled? We need the entire arm to be in a single chocolate brown color. Okay, well, we have such materials. For those who may not be aware, we offer PET G in a range of skin tones, including a dark chocolate brown. That might be good for this. And I know we have some volunteers out there already using those. So I guess we're putting the call out there for printing assistance, and this is for arms. So a larger printer is helpful. Not that you need anything too big. I don't know what the biggest part in an unlimited arm is. I think it's probably that forearm piece. So you don't need anything huge, but just a good decent sized printer. I don't know. Is there anything else we can do to help promote this? This was posted in the main forum. I'm just thinking this.
I guess I think it would be great to know a little bit more about what the story is in Ghana.
It would, yeah. So how about this?
Sarah, that might be a story.
I can follow up with him and see if I can add something for the March newsletter.
That would be great. I think that would be very helpful. And also I'll Adam, if you'll help me to remember this one for our Tuesday meeting, this is the great, opportunity to try something out with, this is the kind of thing that would go into Trello potentially. We could use that as a platform for helping to, to get help with other, even if it's not our initiative, something a volunteer is trying to do, maybe there's a way that we could incorporate that there. So we could talk about that Tuesday.
Where is Cupertino?
California, right?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
sort of Silicon Valley. That's where Apple's headquarters are.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, if they're in the States or not.
Yep. Okay, so we've got several good ideas. And Sarah, I'll let you follow up with Rishab, and Adam and I will talk about how we might be able to help get some additional visibility, but I think the newsletter is a great idea. And I know we always get really good responses on that when it's just a matter of people kind of using their printers in idle time, just print parts. They don't have to assemble anything. I have no doubt you'll find people, especially for, he needs 5 rights and 5 lefts. That shouldn't be too hard to get people to help with.
And Sarah, when you do write an article like that, does that also go up onto Enabling in the Future these days?
No, I don't have any access to that website, but if I am sure I could work on that with Jeremy.
Sure. Yeah. Ben had, the way we set it up with Ben was we gave him author access so he could write posts, and then Jen would just do a final review and she'd be the one to publish them. But I'd be happy to set you up with a similar account if you'd be willing to help draft posts when you have that new content. It would be very, very helpful.
Sure.
Okay, let me make an action item for myself to do that. That one's done. That one's done. Jeremy, set up WordPress account on ETF for Sarah. Will do. All right, moving on then, our recurring events. Next one is today, and I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be able to make this one. I ended up with 2 meetings scheduled over that hour. But today is the Education and New Member Meetup. Let me pop into this month's summary. I think that's the last meeting of this month other than our town halls. Yeah, so that's here today. So Brent Hollers is going to be joining us for a discussion of outreach, resources, and education, and how we can connect with members of the disability community for device use and delivery. I don't know, Sarah, anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. Well, then I invite everyone to join. That's going to be immediately following this meeting, starting at noon Eastern today. Maybe I'll be able to catch the recording. All right, so into our discussion topics. And Connie, thank you for being so patient. Connie's here today because she had some questions about the release of a liability agreement. You mentioned, Connie, that you've been working with an attorney, which is, I was glad to hear actually, because we don't often get, you know, any kind of pro bono legal assistance here. So we can benefit from what you're learning from whatever attorney you're working with. And if you're willing to, we'll maybe incorporate some of the whatever, if there's suggested changes and things like that. We'll certainly be happy to update our template accordingly. So talk to us about what you've heard and what questions you have.
Yeah, so sounds good. I mean, overall, he said it seemed pretty well written, but he had a few questions that he would like answers to kind of finalize everything. The first one he wanted to know is enable a nonprofit, a 501c3, or is it some form of a legal entity? And as I mentioned previously, wasn't able to find anything on the website, you know, what Enable is classified as.
Oh, we got some cleanup to do here, John. I don't know how this happened, but we've got BE team all through here now. So our template got changed. So this,
yes,
we got some.
That was another thing. Yep.
And this says we're linking to this as a Google Doc, but this is not a Google Doc. This is a Word document that has not yet been converted to a Google Doc. So we got some housekeeping to do, John, but let's first address Connie's question. This has always been a point of some confusion, but e-NABLE itself as a community does not exist as any kind of legal entity. There is no e-NABLE corporate headquarters. There is no legal organization that represents the whole community. There are nonprofits like Rochester e-NABLE Limited that John heads up, which is a fiscal sponsor for the e-NABLE Fund. There are many chapters that have their own 501c3 nonprofits, but none of those 501c3s represent the overall global volunteer community. So we are more of a collection of independent and semi-autonomous volunteers and chapters with no central entity that represents and has control legally over all of it.
Okay.
That makes these kind of agreements a little bit tricky.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So no nonprofit.
No nonprofit.
No
So-
overarching nonprofit.
No nonprofit that is over the entire community, that is responsible for the overall community. That's right.
Okay.
as is my tendency, I have made a little diagram, which I will share if I can.
Great. Let me stop this.
So as you can see, e-NABLE is a movement, right? It's just a bunch of people and chapters loosely organized. It is loosely organized to the extent that it is organized globally by this very group. We don't call ourselves the Strategic Planning Committee anymore. What do we call ourselves?
Community Coordination Committee,
There you go, Community Coordination Committee.
which is a mouthful, but that's what it is.
But it's the CCC. And you know, anyone can interact with it, and anyone can show up. So that meets bi-weekly. But we don't really have any power. We just convene these meetings. One of the things we do, however, is discuss community events and help the community make decisions about the allocation of funds by the e-NABLE, allocation of funds by the e-NABLE fund. And the way we do that is through a voting process via Lumia. And so what you actually get is something like this. So there's the movement. There is a 501c3. It has $30,000 in the bank. And the directors are me and Martin Pressburg and Evan Blackman. And frankly, if someone else wanted to be on the board, they would be most welcome. But our only real function as a nonprofit is to make it possible for people to make donations, which go into the e-NABLE fund. And we have minimized our corporate liability as directors because our main responsibility is just obeying the will of the community as determined by the voting process on Lumia. So in answer to your attorney's probable next question, there are directors. There's no director and liability insurance. It's never really been necessary, though we did worry about that in the past, in part because our mission is just to be the fiscal sponsor for the movement and to do the filings on the e-NABLE fund, but decisions are in the hand of the community, which allows us to say we're just doing what the community said it would do, and that's all we claim that we do as to the IRS.
Okay. All right, I'm just taking some notes so I can respond back to him. Okay.
And not that that was a model of clarity, but you can also refer him to the recording that was just made.
Yeah, okay.
And while he was doing that, I found my way to the proper version without all of that BE team editing stuff. So I'm going to have to update this. So I'm going to share this as a Google Doc, but I'm going to add a comment up here to let people know they have to make a copy in order to be able to edit so that we can keep the master intact. So I'll set that up. I'll put this link back into our wiki and everything. So that'll be updated later today, Connie. But for now, this should match what was in the PDF version, which you probably saw.
Okay.
So
Did you have any other questions?
Yeah, did we
Yeah,
answer your
so-
question about the legal entity?
So you answered the first one about the legal entity.
Okay.
The second one, I believe you answered, he asked, does it have a board of directors or some other governing body? It seems like there really is no governing body. The only governing body is under the Rochester, and they basically react to the community-based decisions to determine where the funds go.
I would say the closer thing to a governing body is this group here, the Community Coordination Committee.
Okay.
But it's important to clarify that we're not a governing body as much as an advisory body. We act on the wishes of the community, essentially.
So it's a community coordination committee. Okay, acting on the wishes of the community.
Yeah, based on voting.
Okay. All right, based on voting, okay. And then in there, in the actual document, they list the state of Washington is listed in the waiver. Any idea where Washington came from? Is
Oh,
that
that was probably a holdover from
the B team
Jen
or?
Owen, but I don't, where
Even
is,
farther back, it must be from Enabling the Future. Jen Owen and Ivan Owen, who are among our co-founders, were based in Washington State.
Okay. So then
we
my
should-
question back to him is gonna be, you know, should that state be where the volunteer resides
I would assume so.
or where the recipient lives? I mean,
Well,
which one?
you as the volunteer are the one having this agreement signed to protect you. So it should be the state you live in. The whole idea here is that if something were to happen, you don't want to have to travel to some other state to deal with the legal mess. And not that that's ever going to happen, but I would say you definitely want this to be your state, the volunteer.
Okay. And I believe that answers all my questions. So I can go back to him on that. John, is there any way that you can send me that Word document? Where you were highlighting the overall hierarchy and the structure?
Oh, it's not even a Word document. I'll paste
was
the
it?
image. I'll
Okay.
paste the image into the chat. I've also pasted into the chat our EIN number, where you can find some online official information about Rochester e-NABLE Limited. And you can find a little bit more background, including information about how funds are handled at opencollective.com/Rochester e-NABLE Limited. Also in the chat.
Okay.
Connie, I wonder if you can just review for us what has led you to try to get this document together and how you expect to use it.
So when I've been volunteering and offering to help make the hands for the recipients, I always want to make sure that my best interest is being covered from legalities.
But you've been doing this for a while. Only now have you gotten around to this.
No, I've always had them sign a document. I always, before I even mail it out, they always sign a release waiver.
Got it.
It's more recently that I took it appears that the document has changed since when I first started. And I've been like digging more into it and, I'm confused why Washington is in there, and wanted just to make sure that legally it was solid.
I'm glad you brought it up,
robust.
Connie, because what happens like so many times in this community is there's just so many different hands on things like this. And we just would never have caught that. We just lost sight of it. We haven't looked at that document in a long time. And so I never would have noticed that it even mentioned Washington unless you had brought it up. So I'm glad you did. We'll try to get that fixed up.
And the more recent one, as you saw, had B team on it. So
yeah, I got rid of that one already. So while we were speaking,
Yeah.
I just removed that link from the wiki entirely in both places that it was. So right now, the only link that's in there on the hub is to the PDF. And as soon as I finish making some updates on the Google Doc version I found, I'll put that back in as a proper Google Doc link.
Yeah, so some of them have changed, some of them have modified. I think I was using the older version.
Okay.
Because it didn't have, B team on it and some of the other areas in it.
Yep.
And then I also added in the document that I sent to him was enable, because it said prosthetics. I think it said hand prosthetics. I think I wrote hand prosthetics or assisted devices.
Very good. Yeah.
Because not only is it hand prosthetics, there's also, like I made a bike adapter for,
Absolutely.
young lads. So I want to make sure that it's all encompassing as far as it can go.
Especially since we're in the process of kind of adding those types of devices to our catalog right now. It's good timing to be updating that. So good catch.
And I'm like, his comment was, first thing he said right off the bat, which any lawyer would say is, I'm not a licensed attorney in the state of Washington.
Yep.
And that's where it was, appears that that document was based out of, right?
Right.
So his was just on general guidance of legal principles.
Yep.
He felt it was well drafted and covers the necessary points. And then he started asking more questions into what is e-NABLE, the questions that I asked you.
Sure.
He was suggesting some changes and changing the verbiage from releasees to be more specific. So for example, e-NABLE, its officers, its directors, employees, agents, affiliates, associates, and volunteers. So kind of spelling all that out versus just throwing everything into release.
Right.
Right. So that's all fine. And frankly, it's between you and your attorney.
Yep.
Again, you'll notice we sort of have a hands-off attitude in part because we're
Yep.
limiting our own liability, but then you can feel free to do something you're comfortable with.
But it's also worth remembering that I think our biggest or our strongest protection comes from the fact that there's no exchange of money here. We don't sell these. We're just helping somebody. We're just giving them something. And these are, excuse me, the nature of these devices are such that to my knowledge, no harm has ever come to anybody from any of these, nor do I expect it ever would. So you're talking about a pretty outside chance of anything happening, of anyone having any reason to, hold any of us accountable. But you're doing the right thing, Connie, in being cautious and having the agreement signed. But I think the way that we operate as a community, where we say that these are experimental devices that are being made in collaboration with the recipients, and it's not something that, there's any exchange of funds for, that really works to our favor.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. Yeah. So, yeah, I just wanted to kind of finalize everything so I am more
Thanks for
comfortable
taking
with
the
it.
initiative.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
I took some action items and I'll get that updated and reposted up there. Thanks for bringing those things to our attention. Any other questions or things that came up through that, Connie?
That is it.
Okay.
That's it.
Very good. Well, you're welcome to hang with us, or if you have other things to do, you're welcome to say
Okay.
goodbye. It's entirely up to you.
Okay. I might just hang in and just listen.
Sounds good.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we covered this. We definitely have work to do on the Azure billing. It's gotten up to where it's about $455 a month now. And that puts our annual consumption rate at about $5,400 a year. Our grant is for $3,500 a year. I'm pretty optimistic that we will be able to make adjustments to bring the spend down to what the grant would fully cover. I think it's going to be a matter of just cutting back on the resources that we've allotted. So we might not have to, for example, shut e-NABLE Web Central down. Maybe we just lower the power of the server that it's hosted on. Maybe it doesn't need so much RAM. Maybe the database server doesn't need to be so heavy duty. I just don't know enough to make those changes, but I'm guessing that when I get the right person in there and I explain the situation and the amount of usage that platform is seeing today, I think we'll be able to pull back on the resources enough to bring these costs within the scope of that grant.
Jeremy, did you ever connect with Alex? Like contact there?
No, I sent him a follow-up by email. I'm waiting to hear back, but haven't heard
Gotcha.
anything yet that I'm aware of.
Okie doke.
Okay. But I do have an appointment with one of Microsoft's concierge, onboarding concierges, I'm hoping, and it's for the nonprofit team. I'm hoping they'll be able to help, but they said that could take up to a week for them to get back to me. So I'm waiting for that. Okay, we talked about this. Adam and I are meeting on Tuesday to work on Trello. Any additional thoughts there, Adam? Anything you wanted to talk about here?
Not at this time.
Very good. Outreach. Adam, what do you got to discuss here, if anything?
Well, we met yesterday, the little nascent outreach group. It was Sarah Gelbard. I'm sorry, Sarah, is it Gelbard or Gelbard?
Gelbard.
Gelbard, you got it. Okay. Just want to make sure I don't spend the next couple of years mispronouncing it. Then it was Jacqueline and Brent down Georgia way. They joined the call as well. Had a nice but brief conversation. I really should have scheduled a full hour. But I sent out a quick summary to you, John, and to you, Jeremy. I CC'd you on that.
I saw it today.
Yeah, so we covered a couple of quick things, really nothing that we haven't already discussed ad nauseum in these town halls. Just trying to define what our efforts could or should be in 2023, trying to focus up a little bit on defining like a global and more targeted outreach strategy, while also trying to establish more of a domestic U.S. pipeline to give our, majority U.S. based people in this community more to do once they join. My opinion is that we are losing a lot of potential groundswell of interest and activity because people join and then, expecting there to be some huge network that we have, like a big dossier of potential recipients that are just, begging for a maker to be attached to. And really it's the opposite, that we've got, way more makers than recipients. So trying to see how we can address that. And I think, to Jeremy's point, expanding into adaptive tech beyond simply prosthetics is maybe a great way to address that. So
Excellent.
more to come.
What, and let's see, under next steps here, anything you want to cover here, or do you want to just kind of sum up for us what your next steps are with this group?
Looking at the screen. Yeah, so this is, okay, so this is great. This is what I sent out. Yeah, so the next steps are to do point number one, plan for US domestic outreach. We're trying to see how we can, well, I'm going to say we, but really we didn't get a chance to get too in depth in our conversation yesterday. This is mostly just my wish list. But I really want to see how we can partner with either healthcare organizations and networks like hospital systems across the US, people that have entrenched resources, and people who, if there were more awareness among clinicians and trust in e-NABLE, then we might have a better chance of getting just word of mouth referrals to start building devices in hands. Additionally, getting some more formalized networks built would help us to streamline that in connecting makers with recipients. Regarding relief efforts, I think that we've got a lot of really good independent things running. I really don't know much about what's going on with Ukraine. I don't know much about what's going on with our interest in supporting in Turkey and Syria following the earthquake there. I've got a little bit of additional headway made, some additional ground gained in moving toward supplying devices to Afghanistan. But I feel like all of these kind of need to come under a single umbrella so that we have some consistency and can share lessons learned as we start building up this global network. Awareness and buy-in, this is more about getting the support of the larger community, because I feel like we've got a small number of people who are trying to do a lot, wear a lot of different hats. So I think that trying to open up these town hall meetings and get more people aware of what we're doing is the way that we're going to start getting a little bit more rubber on the road.
People involved.
Yeah, I feel like we got a lot of people who are draining their batteries in a lot of different directions, and we need to get many hands going here to lighten the work. And then finally, this is something that I believe we're doing right now, Jeremy. That we're meeting with the Illinois Adaptive Technology Group. That there are other organizations, groups, and this is not something that we're obviously we can just flip a switch and then all of a sudden we've got all these partnerships. It's going to be, one by one, trying to build up more of a network. Right. And I'm doing some work here, trying to reach out to some groups. I think everybody is trying to do this, but this is another example of trying to, I think, open up this work to the larger community will make this a lot more effective, because I've got insight into the clinical world. I've got insight into what some of these aid organizations could be, as does everyone here. But there are hundreds or thousands of people in this community who really aren't being tapped to contribute to that. So that would be very useful.
So it's just wonderful what you're doing, Adam. How do we go forward in your view on this
I don't know.
trajectory?
Yeah, so that's the big question. So the thing is that there are all these different threads that all go in different directions, right? And a lot of these will eventually marry back up and support the others. But a lot of them, I think, would spin off and be their own endeavors and require their own, separate individuals kind of leading them up. My thought here is that my role is to push a bunch of boulders up the hill and then let other people be in charge of pushing them in the right direction on the way back down. That's a tortured
That sounds
metaphor.
like a lot
There's
of
a better
work,
way.
Adam.
Well,
And you
Sounds
want to
like
be
you're doing
careful
all
you're
the
not
hard
under the
stuff.
boulder when it starts going downhill.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a better way of putting it is, picking out the best boulders to push down the hill. But I think that I think that the gap that we're having is that we've got lots of people joining, or we have had a lot of people joining, but it doesn't really feel like there is I don't know. It doesn't really feel like there is a coordinated group in e-NABLE, and maybe that's by design. Maybe that's sort of the nature of how this is formed. But I don't know. It feels to me e-NABLE is really just like the people on this call right now, and I would really be interested in trying to not necessarily just look outward for outreach. But to kind of look within and try to build up more engagement in our community, and whether that's hosting virtual events that are a little bit more open-ended without like specific focus, or maybe it's trying to schedule meetups in different regions to try to get people who are all members of the e-NABLE community to get together and get to know one another. I don't know. That's not my forte.
I actually have thoughts about how to do what you're talking about, Adam, but I see John has his hand up. So you go first, John.
Yep.
Well, I was actually, Jeremy, you go first.
Well, Adam, I just wanted to point out that I think one of our other parallel efforts ties in with this. We're working on, or I think we're about to be working on at least getting this new matching platform going. And this has been an effort that's been long overdue, but I think that, so just a quick history here for those that haven't been through the 10 years like John and I have. We used to have a human being who was full-time with us doing matching. She was the one kind of taking in the requests and finding a volunteer and connecting them. And the very nature of the feeling of community was totally different at that time. And I think the matching process is a really key part of this. I look at like what chapters in e-NABLE France and in Turkey and in Brazil and other regions like that, where they have a really strong matching process, where there is some human being that's involved in, putting people together and to some extent monitoring cases. And what I'm hoping is that as we bring up this new matching platform and we integrate it into the hub, it's going to be available as a tool for kind of the global community. But to be honest, I'm looking at it primarily, at least at first, as a tool for what I've started to think of as almost like the US chapter. Now, I know we've got a bunch of chapters in the US, but I kind of feel like we need to start treating the US as a big chapter where we have all of the cases coming in through this new platform. We have some human being, or maybe it's a group of human beings that's doing the matching and connecting people and kind of monitoring those cases. And I just think that human element is something that we've been missing. When we lost that person years back due to a whole chain of events that I won't go into, we found ourselves in a lurch. We had nothing. We had no way of dealing with cases. And that's what led to the birth of e-NABLE Web Central. We needed a solution. And since we had no volunteers available at the time to kind of work full time on this, we made it a self-service kind of an approach. And it solved the immediate need, but I don't know that it really helped us in the long run, because here we are now feeling like we've lost something, like that we don't have that same engagement. And I think this is a big part of that puzzle. If we can get back to a matching process that's a little bit more person oriented, I think that'll go a long way to getting that feeling of being able to get engaged when people come in and get meaningfully plugged into something.
Yeah,
they can help with.
So I think that's very much in line with what I've been thinking about how to approach this disconnection that I don't know, this palpable disconnection that I've been struggling with. It seems like having something like an e-NABLE US that doesn't necessarily sit on top of all of the individual chapters that are US based,
That's
but
right.
maybe instead, kind of sits in the middle and can be sort of a node for
Exactly.
communication and coordination. I think that's maybe something that would be more palatable because, I've talked to a lot of people from all over the world since kind of joining this community. And, people in the US are very interested in, their own circle, and making sure
Absolutely.
that they're not, seeding. I'm very much this way as well, wanting my own like little sphere of influence. So I think that trying to come from like a top-down approach is a way to turn people off and
I
lose
completely,
what
yeah, and I
engagement they have.
didn't mean to suggest anything about.
Oh, no.
control or
I
governance.
wasn't saying you were suggesting
You're
that.
right.
I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
Yeah, I mean,
about
essentially
how we
like
can approach
a
this.
shared infrastructure for all of the chapters. And again, the
Right.
hope is to provide a tool set for the global network. But I think if we focus on our mainly on our US chapters, we're going to be starting with an English version of the site anyway. And then we'll add languages. We have that translation tool.
Right.
And of course, we hope that others in other areas will start to adopt it and use it. But I think that's going to go a long way to helping us to be able to let people get more engaged. When you think about having a proper matching platform that allows us to really put people together in a more meaningful way based on proximity, and what we're doing with Trello for the people that want to help in other ways, I see those both as really important pieces of how we can we've done a very poor job of helping people to find their place when they come in as new members.
I agree, and I don't think we should beat ourselves up too much on that front. I think that we just need kind of a shift in focus. If we're going to be doing that, it might be, I don't know, maybe a more positive way of thinking of it is considering like creating some kind of US chapter that connects all of the US chapters currently. Maybe this is kind of
Like
a test
support
kitchen.
chapter, yeah.
Yeah, maybe this is like a test kitchen to see, what works in terms of organizing these groups, and then that can be set as like, some kind of resource for other, global groups that are trying to accomplish the same thing.
That's a good idea.
And that's how we can maybe approach that.
And I guess to do something like that, to form some kind of a US, support chapter or whatever we want to call it, I guess it doesn't even need to be something like, we don't need a 501c3 or anything. I don't see there being any financial aspects to this. It's just a matter of having a kind of a chapter under our own system that, would have, allow us to work under that common umbrella, right?
But
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
so we've talked about some, if you will, mechanistic ways of addressing this. The matching system may be a chapter. But I'll also observe that at other times, we've had Jan Owen and myself and maybe Maria, a number of nameable individuals who were putting a lot of time into this kind of thing. And personally, I have shifted the allocation of my time quite a bit. Jen has moved on to other things. Ivan Owen used to be more involved. He's been out for quite some time. Adam, I think you should recognize that it's a pump that needs priming, and the priming is done by humans. And so part of what's going to have to happen if this thing is going to be flowing again is that there are people who either because they're paid, which we can do, or because they are getting huge personal satisfaction from this, as Rick and Jeremy and I do, are willing to put in some real time and take responsibility for just keeping things moving and stirred up. And then other people begin to collect around them. I do think, so that was one point, is that just realizing that human elbow grease is an important part of this, and it's a free country. And while we do have some money, someone needs to figure out how to use that money in order to make it happen. And we have also seen that money can, if you will, monetize, it can potentially turn a labor of love and caring into paid labor, which is not something we want to do either. So there's that human dimension that I did want to flag. The other thing I wanted to flag is that there are moments when this kind of thing is really hot. This was really hot when 3D printing and 3D printed prosthetics were the cool new thing. That moment passed. They're now sort of things that we take for granted. I do think that the crisis in Ukraine and the crisis in Turkey and Syria could potentially be creating a moment that a wave we could surf. And so that's something to keep in mind. We got an email from Zeynep just earlier this morning that I haven't even read thoroughly, in which she followed up on the chapter leaders meeting, in which we reviewed her situation. It's clear, frankly, that they're still getting oriented. She does greatly appreciate that we care, and she's beginning to organize her thoughts about how we can help.
And by the way, just so that you know, and I should let her know this too, I've already forwarded that email, or Alina did rather, to the two companies, the one that makes our medical grade foam padding and the one that makes the gel, the Lee Tippy gel grips that she needs. So we're waiting to hear back from both companies if they can support her. But we're working on that.
That's great. The other thing is, we do have a constant stream of newbies. They sign into the hub. Many of them don't show up at the new member meetup, which is later today, but they do identify themselves. And simply developing a systematic process for capturing those people at their moment of interest,
Right,
might go a long way towards building a culture from, if you will, from scratch.
I
That
agree. And just so you know, John, that's one that I did put on the Trello board. I'm calling it an e-NABLE hub greeter. And that's, again, something that we used to have. The same person that did our matching, she used to be our greeter in the old Google Plus community. And I agree, that makes a big difference to greet them, get to know how they want to help, how do they want to be involved, and then help them to find their way.
and the bar has now been lowered. I think that getting people to print a splint or print splints is substantially easier.
Or these other kinds of assistive devices we're working to add in that don't need any customization.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But the splints are particularly easy to get started with, and there's a story and a pipeline available for that. So
Yep.
thinking about an onboarding process, which then provided the rewards that would motivate people to stay involved and so on, might be the way to go. That also, I don't think, can be a completely automated process, but thinking through the sinking the hook, right? We've got bait that works. We get people who say, this is really cool, I want to be involved. But we don't have a good methodology for sinking the hook and getting people reliably engaged, even though we have seen that for those who do get reliably engaged, it's an incredibly rewarding process. So it's not like we're sinking a hook to exploit a fish.
Of course.
We're trying to create an opportunity that people can seize.
People want to help. They want to be involved. I think it's just when you get in here as a new member, think about our ecosystem and how intimidating that must be for somebody coming in for the first time. We need to work on that.
If I can just add something, when I see introductions from new members and I comment directing them to the new member page and inviting them to the new member meetup, I rarely get a response so back from them. So even if there's, I don't know, maybe something like a really simple Google form that they could fill out with what their interests are and how they want to help, or if there's like when
You bring-
Trello is up, if there's a more engaging, like, this is everything that's going on.
Well, you bring up a good point, Sarah, that, when we have a new member that's just joined the hub, they might not even yet fully understand how to get their notifications, and they might not be seeing your message. So when somebody signs up for the hub, we do capture certain information, among which is an email address, and I could get you the access you need to go in and see, email addresses. Maybe it's a matter of reaching out offline when somebody joins the hub. Maybe we reach out by email and say, hey, saw that you joined, wanted to learn a little more. And then all they have to do is hit reply,
I mean, I'm happy to do that. I think the automatic hub setting when people, at least when I signed up, is that notifications from the hub go to the person's email. So
Okay.
unless they turn that off, if they
okay,
know
so they
how to
should be
sign
getting-
into the hub to introduce themselves, they should be getting my comment, but I'm happy to
Okay.
take an extra step and email them too.
Well,
But
so-
I mean, when I joined, I was also confused. So by sort of the layout and
Yeah,
technical side of things.
definitely
So
something we need to work on.
new members, yeah.
Don't we already have, I'm trying to remember, don't we have an automated email that goes out when somebody joins the hub that has kind of a welcome to the hub with some links and instructions to get started? Do we have something like that? Do you remember, John?
I suspect that we do.
Because
It's
I'm thinking
embarrassing that we're not sure anymore.
I'm thinking Masvi set something like that up, and I'm thinking that that's something that we probably can modify and never have. I just don't know where that is. That enable custom module, maybe? What is this? Here, new user email. And see, all it has right now is this. So yeah, this is something we need to work on. We could put much, much better information in here about how to get started. Please make sure to join our next new member meetup, et cetera. This is something we got to work on this. Okay.
Is there any way that you can link new people to more
there's
experienced
more.
volunteers?
To link people to what?
More experienced volunteers to kind of mentor and guide them.
We've talked
Instead of,
about that. Yeah, it's a great idea. We have to figure out how to coordinate that kind of a mentoring program. I love the idea. We would have to figure out it's kind of like a whole other matching process then, right?
Yeah.
So we'd have to figure out the how, but I love the idea.
Okay.
Unless Connie and Jeremy, I'm actually communicating to you also, unless Connie, you have some ideas about how to do that or prototype the process. One of the challenges we have is that those of us who show up regularly, on the one hand, we don't have that much, we have limits to what we can do. And on the other hand, we, and I fear the community, tends to think that these are problems we are going to solve.
Well, the thing is e-NABLE is a collection of volunteers, right?
Exactly.
And all the work cannot continually be put on the same volunteers, or you're tapping out their bandwidth. So
Right.
there has to be, and I don't know all the volunteers within the organization, but there has to be some volunteers that are active, that are building devices, that you can pair together and say, okay, these individuals, hey, work with this, this experienced volunteer, and they'll help you through it. Because I'll be honest with you, I was working with a school, they wanted to do STEM, they wanted to get involved with e-NABLE. The two teachers looked at the website and they were just completely overwhelmed. And they're like, I can't make sense of this. And I'm like, it's really not that hard. I'll walk you through the process. I'll mentor you, and they basically just tapped out due to, the extent, looking at the website. They're
So
just
guys, I apologize. I'm going to have to cut this conversation short because I do have a meeting coming up in a few minutes,
Yep.
but I feel like there's been some great ideas in here. I just captured that at the top of our list of discussion topics for next time. So let's continue this conversation about onboarding and how we can improve this experience. Between now and then, Adam and I will be meeting next week to talk about Trello, and we'll talk about how this might fit into that process of getting people engaged in meaningful activities that can have an impact. And let's continue this next week, if you don't mind, but I'm going to have to cut us off for today. And
not at all.
All
You're on
right.
a
Well, thank-
deadline. I get it.
Connie, I'm glad you joined. I hope you'll join us again. It's been great having you as part of this. It's really nice to have a fresh sort of perspective on things. It's helpful.
Okay, you're
All right.
welcome.
I'll
Have a
see you
great
all
rest
next
of your
week.
Afternoon. You bet.